Good day and welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. I guess it doesn't show as well as I hoped or thought it might in the back camera there, but there's that cold steam coming up because it's bloody winter outside and all foggy again out in Alberta. But then it's going to be, I've heard reports as high as 18 degrees in Calgary on Saturday. So day by day, who knows what's going on out here. I guess we get breaks from the winter, which is better than nothing, but I'm not big on them. But a lot of people got on my case for crossing the border into the States for my winter escape down in Arizona, calling me a traitor and all the usual stuff or whatever, or just saying that, you should try out some of the other tropical spots. Well, how's Mexico, Cuba, or the Middle East looking these days for a winter break anyways? I'd say driving down to the desert was probably the safest and best choice I could make. I plan on doing it again this winter. All right, so yeah, we got some crazy world events going on and things like that. But I'm going to start by talking about things a little more locally. The budget came down last week, provincially in Alberta here. And the UCP government in Alberta, they inadvertently caught a break as energy prices predictably spiked due to the latest war in the Middle East. So for every dollar the world price of oil rises, the provincial government garners nearly $700 million in royalties. So if the war in Iran is protracted, it is possible the budgetary deficit of $9 billion announced in Alberta last week could actually turn into a budget surplus by the end of the year. The Alberta government should respond to this by cutting spending. We can't allow a fluke of world oil prices to let the provincial government get off the hook for a deficit that was built primarily due to irresponsible spending. Alberta's debt is going to reach $100 billion, and it should be the shame of politicians and voters alike. If the government wants more money to play with, then paying down that debt has to be priority number one. It will give them $4 billion a year in saved interest payments they can spend without having to hike taxes by a penny. People, including Finance Minister Nate Horner, have been floating the notion of imposing a sales tax on Albertans. The response from citizens at this concept should be nothing less than outrage. The government doesn't have a revenue problem. How many times have we got to say this? It has a spending problem. If they can't get their spending habits under control, revenue from a sales tax would just be dumped into a growing black hole of spending. Sales taxes, they have a declining rate of return as they impact the economy with reduced consumer spending. They raise the cost of living. And, tourisms might choose to spend their vacation dollars elsewhere. It's not a magical pool of funds to tap into without consequences, as some are trying to frame it. The UCP government raised the education property tax by nearly $500 million. These taxes impact the cost of housing for renters and owners alike. They also hike taxes on rental cars and hotels, which is going to hit our tourism revenue. With massive tax and spending hikes, the government can't pretend to be fiscally conservative. Yes, mass immigration has put pressure on services in general. The 6% increase in health spending and the whopping 30% increase in education spending addresses that. Most Albertans are okay with increasing spending within reason, at least on core services such as health and education, but that still leaves a lot of fat to be cut. Why is the province increasing spending on art? How much ugly, crappy public art do we need? Why is the cost for to paying government employees going up 14% in 1 year? Why is there still a massive expensive program to bring fiber optic internet services to isolated rural homes when most of them have already gotten Starlink? They got sick of waiting for the government. The list of things to cut is long when the government finds the will to look for them. Problem is the government isn't looking. They're taking the lazy NDP-style approach to issues by raising taxes and spending, and that's not what Albertans voted for. Did the spending increases buy any love from the teachers' unions or socialized healthcare activists? Of course not. They panned the budget and they're still doing everything in their power to bring the UCP down. The Alberta Federation of Labor with old Gil McGowan there's planning mass protests after an attempt to bring down the government through recall initiatives. That failed dismally. So why pander to them further? Premier Smith must trust Albertan voters to accept spending restraint. Albertans have voted for conservative governments for decades because they value fiscal conservatism. It was the gross overspending of the Stelmach and Redford governments that brought the progressive conservative dynasty to an end. Smith can rest assured if she doesn't get a handle on spending soon, an alternative will form on her right. And we do all remember what the consequences of vote splitting are. Look, when Ralph Klein balanced the budget, he didn't wait for better oil prices to do it. He cut spending without apology. Unions and pundits, they went wild at the time. They predicted the demise of the Klein government and protests flourished. Then Klein went to the polls and Albertans rewarded him with a bigger majority government. Klein continued with the austerity governance and union members literally attacked the legislature with protests and they were trying to kick the doors down. After 4 years of this, Klein was rewarded with a bigger majority. In his last term, Klein started to spend heavily again and it led to reduced support for him. Look, the only thing harder than cutting spending during tough times is cutting spending during good times. But it must be done. Smith must resist the urge to continue tossing money at issues, even if the high oil prices flood the government coffers. Alberta doesn't need a larger and more encompassing government. It's hard to maintain the higher ground when complaining about tax and spend attitudes in Ottawa when Edmonton does the same bloody thing. For the sake of the economy and future Albertans, the UCP must remember the C in their name and become a conservative party and wrestle their spending under control, because the 2026 budget is nothing less than an embarrassment. That's all I got on that. How's it going, Dave?
It's going good, Cory. How are you?
Oh, good, good. I mean,
Apart from the budget
yeah, well, it kind of annoyed me.
and the war,
Yeah, the war is a little distressing as well.
I saw on social media yesterday that your bees are bringing out their dead.
Yes, they are. Yeah, they were enjoying the good weather. They were out in droves. And yeah, that's what they do. They drag all the dead ones out and dump them out in the snow. You also see little brown spots all around the yard on the snow, too, which, they call them cleansing flights. But all it is the bees, they won't poop in the hive. They'll take it out.
So how many bees would be dead over winter?
I don't know. It's, they really, that's their cycle. They really pad it up with, like 50,000 bees by the end of fall, really getting ready to go into winter. And then they cluster and probably be down to maybe 15,000 by spring. So it's just kind of a cycle. And then they should be starting to lay again now. So
There you go. There you go. Circle of life.
yeah, so I'll open them up and get the hell stung out of me for the first time in spring, probably in another few weeks.
There you go. Let's talk about war, Cory. U.S. and Israel bombing the hell out of Iran. The Ayatollah is dead. They're not picking they haven't picked a new one yet. All the senior clerics decided stupidly to hold a meeting during daylight hours yesterday in Tehran, and Israel dropped a bomb on their head, so they're all dead. There was a first time since the Second World War, a U.S. sub sank a naval ship, sank an Iranian frigate off the coast of Sri Lanka. So scores of Iranian sailors are dead or treading water or shark food at the moment. So lots kicking off all over the place. Diplomatic wise, Great Britain is in a big fight with the U.S. for not helping them. The president, Donald Trump, badly insulted British leader Keir Starmer yesterday by saying he's no Winston Churchill. And he's right, there is no Winston Churchill. Closer to home, Natural Resources Minister Tim Hodgson said, "Hey, this war is good for us. It's good for energy." And the quote was, "We see the money."
Yeah, well, that's a little closer to what I was talking about with the budget. Okay, yeah, so world events have brought in funds, but not really in the nicest way.
No. But he says it's an opportunity to get safe, reliable Canadian energy out exporting around the world. And if only there was like a way to do that.
I don't know, if a blimp maybe, fly it out there or something.
There was plans at some point back in the day of getting dirigibles up there filled with oil. What else is going on? Oh, we got Mark Carney. It continues his never-ending world tour. He's down in Sydney today, changing his stories on about the war. Former Israeli Prime Minister called Carney stupid today. And we've got Pierre Poilievre in Germany giving a speech in Berlin this afternoon. We've got a deep dive into that Musqueam Treaty mess that's over in Vancouver. I would certainly not move into Vancouver at this point.
No, I mean, I understand. They say that, this is just a gesture. It's a symbol. Don't worry about your real estate prices. Well, they said that with Richmond too, and banks refused to refinance, and companies pulled the hell out. I'm sorry, I don't believe them anymore.
No, and it's not going to be the last one, right? I mean, it's pretty soon they're going to be all over Canada.
Well, I would suggest that productive, hard-working British Columbians sell their houses now while they can, come to Alberta, make a good living in the land where it was already all permanently ceded in the treaties.
Do we have room though?
Well, if they're hardworking, productive people, yes.
And we got a report going to City Council today that because of the infrastructure repair needs that were ignored by Nenshi and Gondek, we're now facing a $610 million bill to fix up infrastructure. So
Yeah.
that'll raise taxes a little bit.
Well, yeah, Calgary's back into the if it's yellow, let it metal zone, isn't it again? With
I
that
think
water
so.
line.
I think so. Water rationing coming in on Monday. So we're all going to go to your place and shower in the morning.
Yeah, I got my own well. I'll charge, a moderate
Charge?
rate. Well, bring some cookies or something.
All right, maybe cookies.
I noticed Jeremy Farkas has been on the warpath with Premier Smith, and I got to admit he's kind of right. Like,
He is.
they went and dumped the tax hike onto the city of Calgary, but then they're taking the loot.
Yeah,
back to Edmonton.
largest tax hike against Calgary in history. It's more like $355 a household. It's outrageous.
Yeah.
Absolutely outrageous.
But then it's only like 100 and some per household in Edmonton. For
Yes. Of course, would you rather live in Edmonton? Come on. No, exactly. So I guess we got to suck it up and pay it. I have to suck it up and pay it. You don't.
No, I'm in
Because
the
you're,
county foothills.
Yeah, you're not a citizen.
Foreigner. Right
So
on.
there you go. That's all I got at the moment.
Okay, well, thanks for the update, and I guess I'll see you in a while in the pipeline.
We will.
Right on. All right, guys, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And this one I like to remind you, there's a lot of those stories. They're breaking fast and heavy on there. The reason Dave and his cadre of reporters that he's managing can do that is because you've subscribed. So check it out, westernstandard.news/subscription. It's $10 a month, $100 for a year. This is how we can pay these bills around here and keep ourselves independent and reporting on those stories that legacy media just won't touch. So yeah, let's see some of you folks with the comments. We see Quacker saying hi. Vacation destination is nobody's business. Well, I didn't ask yours, Norma, so that's okay. Don't worry about it. If you want to go to Mexico, by all means, it's your full business. Or if you meant on my end, when people got on my case when I openly said I was going to Arizona, and yes, it made me an awful traitor. I see what you're talking about there as well. And yeah, I don't know. I just laugh about it. And yes, it is. You're just absolutely right. Anyways, it is a person's own business, but that's the life of social media. When you want to share things, you're inviting the busybodies of the world to come in and comment on things, or at least I am. That's part of the problem when I share everything on X. I mean, I can't complain when I get vitriolic responses. I'm kind of asking for it when I stick things out there. I could remain more private, but that's no fun. So let's see. Yeah, that's the issues going on. Yeah, I see that from Norma now. Thanks for defending me. It's hard to get context on commentary on there, so I appreciate that, Norma. And for those on here live and that, just bear in mind, we do have an option for live callers in the final part of the show, though nobody's taking me up on it. It's because they know Cory's such a grouch and they don't necessarily want to interact with me. But honestly, if you want to call in and chat, you can see the number at the bottom of the screen, 866-479-9378, and the extension 711. You'd be put on hold towards the later part of the show, and we could pop you in and have a conversation about one of these many, many issues that are going on right now. And there is a lot happening. All right, but I see the guest in the lobby, and I meant to mention that at the top of the show. I've been looking for it. This is former Alberta Human Rights Commissioner head there, Colin May. He's also a senior fellow at the Frontier Centre, director of research with the Free Speech Union of Canada. And he's written many things on the National Post, the Hub, the Jerusalem Post, and the Calgary Herald. And, the Human Rights Commissions have been in the news again, and it's rarely in a good way. And it's time to have a discussion about these. Do we need them, or can they be improved, or what purpose do they serve? So let's bring Mr. May in and have that conversation. Hello, Colin. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Cory. Thanks for having me.
So I guess just to get a bit of a background, I remember it from at the time when you were there. For a short time, you were the head of the Alberta Human Rights Commission, and it's basically you got canceled.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got canceled. And I think in part it was because I was interested in making some changes there. The Alberta NDP, who knew me personally, didn't want me to do that. And so they came up with their series of smears to get me out. But, that was my goal. I was in there to make some changes, to make some important changes, and now they didn't get done. So that's too bad, but happy to talk about what I would see as something that needs to be done with some of these commissions.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you're a lawyer. There were other things you could have been doing with yourself, but you chose to join the Human Rights Commission. I can only presume You felt, though, you could do some good. What purpose did you see then in human rights commissions? What good could they have been providing for the province when you joined it?
Well, I mean, I had a background in some of these similar areas, complaints, tribunals, that sort of thing. I was involved in trying to reform professional regulators, which is another topic, similar to human rights commissions. And I thought that, we could do some work with the commission as well to improve procedural fairness, especially because a lot of the issues that we're seeing, including with the Newfell case in BC, do come down to whether or not these commissions are actually procedurally fair. And so I wanted to make some changes there. I have a lot of background in that, and that was why I was hoping to what I was hoping to do there.
So there must be some guidelines, so I'll kind of circle this back to the recent case that's really kind of got a lot of, well, there's a couple recently that got people worked up, one's in BC, one's in Ontario. One, I'm just talking to the extent of the penalty laid against a person, $750,000, which I can only guess this man is going to appeal this somewhere to a proper court because it just seems beyond the pale. But are there any limitations on these commissions on the possible penalties they could lay on people?
Not really. No, I mean, that's the thing. And now generally they're in the lower range, 20,000, 10,000. I think the highest in Alberta when I was chief still was about 40, 50,000. But there isn't an upper limit. Now the courts reviewing these can say, yeah, you've gone way too high here, which I'm hoping, even if whether the courts uphold, the determination on the substance, hopefully they will review this and say this award is way out of the range of the plausible, especially for an individual, because there is a sort of a common law duty to be fair to the respondent. And this case just isn't. This is. I mean, they haven't even identified the people who will be receiving the money yet. So we don't even have actual complainants who will be receiving the money. It's just a broad class, which I think is completely inappropriate for this sort of award.
Yeah, and that's another point that's interesting is that, the complainants can be quite well rewarded if they win through these, though it's not going through the proper channels of a civil action in a regular court. So it really incentivizes people to bring in, as concerns when they're not necessarily, I mean, you can't speak for all of them, but not necessarily looking to remedy an injustice. I mean, conceivably, some people are just looking to make a few bucks at times.
Oh, sure. Now, I mean, once they break up this 750,000 that Newfeld's supposed to get, it might not be that much, but they have no idea yet who these people are that they're even going to give this money to. But that's exactly one of the problems with these things is that, the awards, the larger and larger awards incentivize people to use these procedures, certainly. And the thing you've got to know about these procedures is, as a complainant, you have no skin in the game, really, because you don't have to pay for a lawyer. That's all taken care of for you. You're represented by these commissions and into a tribunal. You don't have a lawyer. And if you lose, unless you've done something egregious while you've been a complainant, you won't have to pay any costs, which is completely different, of course, from a civil action. So the respondent, of course, has to pay a lawyer, has to go through this process, and the process takes years. In Alberta, it was about 5 years when I became chief just to get to the tribunal, to a hearing. So for a respondent, this is a horrible process to go through.
So to play a bit of devil's advocate, or maybe not even so much, I mean, there could be people who have really experienced a human rights, violation against themselves, and they want to seek remedy. If they are a low-income person without legal connections and so on, though, I mean, going through the conventional system could leave them hanging because that could take years as well, but cost, many thousands of dollars that they presumably don't have. Is that part of the purpose, I guess, of having a commission rather than putting people through conventional courts?
It is, yeah. And I think that's certainly a plausible, that was sort of the reason these things started up. Now, what's happened, though, is you've seen that these commissions, most of what they deal with are employment matters. So often what you'll find is somebody has been fired, they're making a claim under the Human Rights Commission, but they'll often have a wrongful dismissal suit going through the courts as well. So do we want to have that sort of this commission also being running adjacent to civil action. They may be going to employment standards. They may be going through a grievance process with the union. And of course, the commission now does have more authority in Alberta to stay their proceedings or to put them on hold. But, you know, we've kind of moved beyond this basic idea of, okay, you know, so I say you have a gay couple and they're trying to rent an apartment and they're denied the rental. They could go through this process and say there was discrimination. But we're getting these massive awards that would really be more appropriate to be considered in a civil case, not in this sort of venue.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then there's the crazy large awards. Then there's some small awards, but on some really absurd rulings, which is one that came out in the last couple of weeks as well. So I believe that was in Ontario, or maybe it was Quebec. It was a non-binary person who was demanding a non-binary option for haircuts. And this person had the same need for haircuts that you do. So we aren't even looking at a rational need. This was a bald person demanding a specific type of haircut option. I mean, you would think a person with even a smidgen of common sense would tell this complainant, get out of here. We've got better things to do with our time. But instead, they ruled in favor of this person and fined the place $500.
Yeah, and I think that's again, it's a procedural issue. It shouldn't have gone to that length. The respondent, this salon, had offered, you know, three free haircuts, and as you say, I don't know what I saw the person too. I'm not sure what he, they, she, whatever needed them for. I'm not sure what pronouns they use, but you know, and plus they had said they would remedy on their website so that the problem, so that you would have a non-binary option. And so why wasn't that sufficient? That should have stopped the case there. It should have been accepted. But instead, the complainant moved it along, didn't accept that. The commission should have said no. And there are procedures increasingly now with these commissions to say, if you don't accept a reasonable offer, then you're done. And I think we need more of that. And that's why I say, again, we need to focus a lot more on the procedural elements, because the case in Quebec is also ridiculous.
Well, and they're using it as a weapon, some individuals anyways, and activists. It reminds me farther back to when, you know, same-sex marriage was just starting to become a thing. And I'm fully supportive of it, by all means. Hey, great, you know, good on you. I hope it works. Hope you know, last till retirement and beyond as a married couple, whoever you might be. But there were couples, I remember one in particular that in Vancouver, I think it was, went after a Knights of Columbus hall because they knew darn well it's a Catholic organization and it wouldn't host their reception. Now, if it was the only hall in the world, I could see the problem. But you know darn well there was dozens of halls. Just pick one of those. But they were looking for trouble. And if you're looking for trouble, does that, you know, why should that still entitle you for remedy? That's activism. That's not somebody who's been harmed in a human rights problem.
Right. And I one of the concerns, and this was in the Neufeld case out of BC, is there was the mention that human rights issues are now moving more, discrimination is going more from individuals and complainants to thoughts, to belief systems. And people are discriminating more on the basis of belief systems. But the problem with going that route is, of course, people argue over belief systems all the time. You know, that's why you go to university or something. You learn other people's ways of doing things, how they think about things, you know, different philosophies, and you argue over them, and you disagree, and you say some are wrong, or so. You know, we're moving into that range, and I think that's a very scary thing, which is, of course, why a lot of people have said in response to a situation like the Neufeld case is BC, and Alberta would need to do this too, needs to get rid of the provision in their human rights code or statute regarding this hate speech and the publication of hate speech, in the same way that the federal government did under Harper, and also Ontario, which does not have this provision in its code.
So, kind of where, you know, when you'd contacted me and something I'd been saying online, I'm kind of at the point of just saying, let's just get rid of these commissions. I mean, there's nothing they're providing that actually can't be provided in the current court of law. In fact, they've morphed into something, a quasi-judicial layer of bureaucracy that can really punish people. But I mean, I don't know. Is it reparable, or maybe is it just time to get rid of these and expand our court ability?
I guess I'm sort of either way. Let's try something. Let's just do one or the other. I think we could repair them, but it's going to take some serious look at the procedural elements that need to be fixed. And I've been a bit surprised that Danielle Smith, given how she's looked at some of the procedure elements of professional regulators, hasn't looked at the Human Rights Commission, because it needs some work, a lot of work actually. But on the other hand, maybe it is time to get rid of them, because you could just create a statutory tort of discrimination and it would go to the courts. Now, of course, the courts don't really want that, because these were small amounts, they were small claims, and they didn't really want to have to deal with them. So they sort of liked having them over at this special commission, and they just review the decisions if they're bad. But, if we're going to get into these large numbers, then absolutely, I think the courts need to deal with this, because there's the procedural fairness is much better at the court level. You have two parties who are both can, be, if either one loses, there's costs awarded, but we don't have that yet. So I think we have to really consider, if you're going for we maybe do need to get rid of these commissions altogether if we have these higher awards.
Or I'm wondering, I mean, you're more, of course, the expert on legal matters. Could another type of court be set up? I'm thinking along the lines of, there's drug courts, for example, because we didn't want to really choke up our already overburdened criminal courts with a lot of people who were obviously suffering from addiction problems, but you still have to deal with them. So there's some jurisdictions outside of Canada that set up drug courts where at least then they'll have specialized type of, it's still a prosecution, but it's focused more on the rehabilitation of the individual, and it's a little different, and it takes things out of, you don't have a murderer sitting next to a person who's just an addict who was got themselves into trouble. Could a division of the courts be dedicated? It's still the legal system, still the courts, but it would be just dedicated to these human rights things, and then you would still have some of the same controls as you would in a proper courtroom.
Well, sure, I think you could. Now, I'd want to be careful with that, because, of course, one of the other problems is these tribunals that are set up all have a mandate. So they tend to skew towards a certain view of what human rights should be and shouldn't be. So that's another problem with them. So like you say, if we could certainly put them into the court system, and because human rights cases are, like when I was chief, 80 to 85% of the cases were about discrimination in employment. So most lawyers who deal with human rights are also employment and labor lawyers. So they could be kind of wrapped into that part of, and have sort of a court just specifically dealing with that. And the courts are certainly trying to make some changes to speed up employment and wrongful dismissal claims. So certainly I think that would be another possibility, and get them out of this sort of activist approach. And of course, in the BC case, you had, they're very activist there. They even have a commissioner whose whole role is to push a certain notion of human rights, which is very identity based, which I would completely get rid of. I don't think that's legitimate at all. But yeah, I think we could certainly move to the courts.
Are these solely provincial jurisdiction, or is this a federally driven sort of thing like criminal law?
Every province sets up their own, so they're different across each jurisdiction. But the feds also have a Canadian Human Rights Commission, which has had its own issues. There's been accusations of racism going on there, and their chief ran into a problem. He got booted out. He came from Alberta, actually. So yeah, I think they're across the country, but each one is different too. So they have different approaches.
All right. Well, that time went fast, but it's interesting. I see a commenter saying human rights. I'd say get rid of them. I'm hoping, and I'm thinking the person means the commissions, not the human rights in of themselves. But human rights are important, and the protection of them is important, and for people who aren't necessarily able to defend themselves. So it's going to be an ongoing discussion. Unfortunately, it just seems we've kind of created a monster in the mechanism that has defeated its initial perhaps goals and purposes. So before I let you go, though, you're quite prolific with your columns and things online. Where can people find your work and your stuff so they can follow up on what you're doing?
I have a lot of it on my LinkedIn page. I also have a muckrake page, actually. I didn't set it up. I guess if you write enough, you get one of those. But I've got quite a bit on there on my Facebook page. So look at any of those, and if anybody's interested, send me a link, ask me to chat, and I'm happy to talk about any of the things that I've written about recently.
And you still have an active legal practice in the province as well, I believe? Or?
Unfortunately, when you're canceled and fired publicly, it slows your legal practice down. So my practice is not up to full speed yet. And of course, I'm involved in litigation with with certain parties. So, that takes up some time, but I'm getting back there. I'm kind of, I'd say I'd have half of a practice.
All right. Well, either way, I hope it takes off, and I do hope you get remedied for. Yeah, it's that would be almost a whole separate interview to talk about the BS. Whereas you ended up getting canceled. As I said, I remember it happening at the time. I think I might have written a column on it actually back then. So, well, thank you very much for the time you gave us today, and for talking about this. And well, let's just hope if we keep pushing, some common sense will finally come in. I mean, it doesn't always get there, but we got to keep trying.
Yeah, well, in these, I think the common sense is what's needed, and it's not there, and there hasn't been. We just haven't shone enough light on these things, but hopefully these bad decisions will, spur some change.
I hope so. I guess when they overshoot the target far enough, it can actually lead to positive change later. It's just unfortunately, Mr. Neufeld's got to suffer some stress until it gets to that point. Mm-hmm. So thank you again, and I hope we get to talk again soon.
Great, thanks, Cory.
Great, thank you. So yes, guys, that is Colin May, and yes, he's done a lot of work out there, and I see that as well. He's completing a book right now on the future of cancel culture. I wrote on that. Actually, that was in a different publication. I write in multiple places myself, but about the Kaylin Ford case. Speaking of cancel culture, and that's one that just got into. There's Western Standard stories on it. We're covering that. Got into the courtroom. Speaking of things that take a long time, I think that began in 2019, and she's finally getting remedy in the courts there. That's part of how things unfortunately wear you down when it comes to trying to get justice for yourself. But she's really been victimized by cancel culture, and she's pushing back and she's fighting back. And to a degree, she's already been winning. There's been a couple already settled out of court. Knobs such as Duncan Kinney, I believe, did, and his little I can't keep track of them. Progress Alberta or Press Progress, but look that stuff up, because we do have a civil courts means to deal with things. But as we're seeing too, it can really take a long, painful, and expensive time. So again, hats off for Kaylin. She wasn't giving up, and she's been pushing. And CBC and the Toronto Star and the NDP all are defendants in this thing. Jacqueline Littler saying setting up more courts for specialized things, just kick the can down the road. Saw the results of divorce courts by a friend, disgusting. Yeah, family court. I mean, law is complicated. It's a mess. Of all areas, I wouldn't want to be a lawyer or judge in it. If I had to be a lawyer or judge, I think I'd want to stay away from the divorces for all I'm worth. But of course, somebody has to do it. Somebody has to be the mediator. Somebody has to sit in the middle. Look, there are some cases of over, too much intolerance, and they're to the point where it gets where somebody should be perhaps, punished, discouraged. I don't know. And we need a rational discussion on it, though. Not when some he, them, whatever the heck it is, nutcase wants to demand a haircut when they have no hair, or that Jessica Yaniv deal out in BC. You might remember that guy was out there demanding that minorities in aesthetics places wax his nuts. We all remember that. And then, of course, it was just an extortion scheme, really, because he would take it to the Human Rights Commission, because, of course, they will take every case, at least to consider every case, and it would freak out those people, and he would hope for a settlement outside of that. And why people like that are taken seriously and able to abuse that system, we've got to stop that idiocy. So let's get more into BC. We got some crazy stuff going on, that Musqueam decision, which nobody quite seems to know what it means yet. But I mean, some of the stuff at first they wouldn't put the agreement out, the federal government and the Musqueam in British Columbia, what's going on, like, is this land given control over, is it not? And they wouldn't give the text of the agreement. So they did release the text. And one of the things in it says it does not create title and does not constitute a treaty or land claims agreement. Okay. But then they could also potentially seek that through the courts. The Cowichan did that. And this opens the door. So some of the people are kind of, I think, overreacting, at least on the immediate consequences of what's going on with that settlement or the agreement or whatever the heck it is. But they are not wrong in being freaked out and concerned about what this is going to turn into farther down the road. This never stops. This never stops. There's where I get on the case of this Truth and Reconciliation Commissions and endless settlements and payouts and so on. When does it end? How many more generations? Are we going to have to get 500 years away from when Canada became a country or Alberta became a province before we finally say, okay, we've paid back enough? No, it won't end because there's a whole pile of lawyers making a whole pile of money out of this. Not to mention a whole lot of claimants constantly reaching their hands out and getting settlements. I talked about that recently, of course, with the grifters. I'll say that, the fraudsters and the Kamloops band who took $12 million to exhume and dig holes and never did it. And where's the responsibility? If it had been in the business world, you either would have been charged with fraud or at the very least taken to court and would have a lien put on your house until you pay the money back. Nothing, though. Nothing. What did they do? They gave them another $12 million so they could build a healing lodge for the bodies they never found. This endless irresponsibility, this endless settlement of something that can never be settled, apparently. This compensating generationally for things that happened hundreds of years ago. Not only all of that, but it's not working. It's not working. Go onto any reserve and look at the conditions. Look at any of the statistics for Indigenous Canadians, any of them, health, economic, education, any of them. And they're lagging on all of them and getting worse all the time, despite more and more and more and more money being pumped at them. Maybe it's time to stop because it's not working. If it was working, maybe we'd have something to say. Harmony, balance, health, singing. So what is working properly? And even in Alberta, I imagine you mean with the Human Rights Commissions. I think in Alberta, we aren't hearing about them as Colin said, these are things that are provincially, I guess, at least administered. So perhaps the Smith government hasn't put the ideological lunatics at the head of the Alberta one. I imagine the complaints have been going forward. But if this commission's been showing some common sense and actually vetting these and saying these are nuts, maybe that would work. That's part of it, I guess. You really just, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to get somebody heading these things who can't just look at some of these frivolous cases and just say, no, we're not going to spend our time on that. We're not going to go after somebody on that. You are being unreasonable and we aren't going to let you take up any more of our time. But they don't, or at least, we never see the ones they say no to. But when we see some of the crazy ones they say yes to, it doesn't seem that they turn down too many. Speaking of insanity, Brampton, Ontario, really turning into one of the hubs for Canada in its bad examples. And they hosted a memorial for the Ayatollah Khomeini following his death. A memorial. The man who killed 30,000 protesters in 5 days. The double standards in this world. 30,000 protesters, just protesters of his own people in 5 days. And he didn't get a fraction. Well, actually, the crap caught up with him now, didn't it? But of the world condemning, whatever. You know what I mean? The world didn't get on his case like they do every time an errant action happens from Israel, do they? The man's a monster. I mean, you see the quote going around with that man. He's the one who was saying before they sentence women to death. And by the way, Iran routinely sentences women to death for the crime of being raped. But there's other crimes, not listening to their husband, things like that. And if it's some sort of crime a woman has allegedly committed, maybe she hasn't been raped because she's still a virgin, but they're going to put her to death because that's what they like to do over there. He's the one who said, make sure she is raped before she is put to death so there's no chance she can get into heaven in the afterlife. Can you get any more evil and vile than that? Yet, here's some evil, vile individuals holding a memorial for that man. Yeah, the world is an ugly, ugly thing. I mentioned a little earlier on my thing. Yeah, we've got the Alberta Federation of Labor. That's headed by Gil McCowan. He's been there a long time. You get in those labor positions, they're almost as good as being a Indigenous chief for getting those the money, and job security. He won't admit it, but the reality is that whole recall attempt that's falling apart chronically. They were supposed to petition. They were supposed to unseat the Smith government. Oh yeah, legacy media was reporting on it in hushed tones. Oh no, Danielle Smith's in trouble. These recalls might knock her majority down to a minority and she'll lose government. No, in fact, they totally flopped. So now he's saying he's going to launch a big campaign to fight for Alberta's silent majority. They're really silent, Gil, aren't they? So this ought to be fun to watch. It's the only thing. There's one of the things that I guess, because like I said, I'm trying to be constructively critical of the Smith government, because for the most part, I like them, and I certainly appreciate Danielle Smith in general. She's we're very close to each other ideologically, and I think she wants to do the right things. But there's that temptation of just going with the flow or going whatever way you're pushed from the opposition. And the only opposition we have right now is coming from the left. So that's when they're throwing money at issues rather than solving them, because that's a left-wing approach to it. But look at the opposition. Naheed Nenshi, he's failing brutally. People still don't even really know who he is. He's not grabbing the imagination of Albertans. The NDP is sinking in the polls, which, again, kind of worries me a little, because we've got to make sure to keep a little fire under the government, whether it's a government you like or not. And he's not doing that. He's failing. He's a terrible leader of the opposition. Max Fawcett, if you really want to see leftist knobs, he's a special sort of example of one. But even he has been coming out now, and this is fun to kind of watch in a morbid sort of way. They're starting to call for Nenshi to get out. They're saying it's time. You failed. He didn't even get 2 years in the leadership, I think, yet. And the NDP is already saying, yeah, this isn't going to work. That's fine. let's watch the scrapping keep happening there. But also at the same time, we need some pressure, constructive pressure, real opposition, not just that constant, we just oppose everything you're doing pressure. We need a good opposition. That's what I like to think a free media can provide. And something I said to a friend recently, I've said this multiple times. I think the most conservative federal government we ever had in Canada was Jean Chrétien. And how so? Well, it's because the Reform Party was breathing down his neck. And it was pressuring him to get spending under control. And that forced him to balance the budget. But you see, they will respond to where their pressure is coming from. And let's see, we do have a call on the line. Finally, somebody's giving me a call. My feelings were getting hurt there. So let's wrap up the show with a quick chat with whoever we got on the line there, and see what else is happening. Hello, who we got here?
It's Christian.
Hey, Christian, how you doing?
Hello?
Yeah.
Good, how are you?
Good. We just got a couple minutes left, but I appreciate the call. What you got to say?
I have a question, because Alberta government went like $9 billion into the deficit, how are they planning on paying that off, or what is there even a plan, or are they kind of just going to keep do what Ottawa does and just constantly kick the can down the road and just raise deficits and just be like, not our problem type deal? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not inside their rooms, but it's a very good question, and there's truth to it, because we're supposed to be better. I think the plan was to kick it down the road and hope that oil prices rise. And they kind of got their wish. So the oil prices went up, but that's part of why I was saying people like me have got to keep the pressure on them and not let them get lazy when the oil prices are high, so that we don't have these later. But it's a very good question. They're acting just like Ottawa, and I think they're kicking it down the road.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think I was going to say, even if oil, I don't think oil prices stay long for too much longer, because every war comes to an end at some point. So hopefully it's sooner than later, but yeah. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And you're right. Eventually the prices will come down. Somebody pointed that out not too long ago. I saw oil prices actually, when they spike like this, often will have a big crash later. So they shouldn't budget hoping that the prices are going to stay up. You see, we're getting wisdom from the callers here. I wish Christian was sitting in the room with the Premier and pointing out that true common sense of just, guys, we're Albertans. We're supposed to be doing better. So let's keep that opposition up, as I was saying, because we don't really have it coming from the right. We don't have the pressure telling them, hey, guys, get your spending under control. Okay, I think that's the time we got for today. I appreciate the calls. I appreciate the comments coming in the scroll. And again, be sure to subscribe and watch The Pipeline tonight. It will be on. And as well, so, you know, Marty Up North and other shows that are coming on stream. Subscribe to those things, like, share, all of that good stuff. And we'll make Alberta a better place yet. Thank you. See you on the next one.